So we're back with this UI tutorial. We're going to add the finishing touches, the drop shadows and things. We're getting close. I've got the wrong font, as you can see, for the title thing, but the rest of it's looking pretty good. Okay, don't know why, having said that, that is so light. Not light enough, I mean. So let's have a go at finishing this off. I'm just going to move this one across to the side. Again, as a reference, so it's nice to have it knocking about. These are all part of that group. So what I'm going to do for the moment is enter the group, and I'm just going to cut these out, because what I don't want is when I position the copy of this that it moves everything. So go back to the beginning, paste it in place, let's just nudge it, and we will group them separately. Okay. So I'm going down to my artboards. I'm going to the last one, which was color redefined. I'm just going to copy it. It's going to make a copy right next to it, as you can see, and we're going to work on that one there. All right. So final touches really are drop shadows to this, lightning flash in the battery, things like that. In this original file, if I bring back my layers, you will see that I made a quick thing of how to make the lightning thing. And there's, like with everything in Illustrator, there are many ways to do everything. I could draw it with a pen tool, but it wouldn't be symmetrical. I can use a triangle tool, reduce the width, skew it, move it across, and this will be in the file that you can download. Is basically my sort of 5 or 6 step process. I make a triangle, reduce the width, use the direct selection tool to align those elements, duplicate it 90 degrees, 180 degrees, rotate it, duplicate and rotate 180 degrees, move into position, use Pathfinder to join, rotate, stick it on top of the battery symbol, punch it out using Pathfinder. Okay, all the things that we've covered so far. Similarly, back on this screen over here that we've got to, I'm going to do a similar thing, but this time rather than creating a triangle, you could go into your Polygon tool, click, choose 3 sides, create your triangle and edit. But much easier than that. In this case, for me, it's a bit like Lego. You're kind of solving problems all the time. I'm just going to build in a triangle by creating a rectangle that's the right size, then using the pen tool to modify it. If I hover over this top right anchor point, I get a little minus sign. Click that, triangle's gone. Okay, rectangle's gone and got triangle in its place. Pick out a color. I'm going to use this one for the shadow, and I can go to my transparency and I can choose multiply. Okay, I could also make it lighter, use multiplier. I can also adjust the opacity up here. So that would be a way of creating like a hard-edged equivalent. Given the fact that most of this interface is quite sharp, that would be a pure sort of 2D version. I could duplicate that over here. I would want to make sure, as I said before, the original image, this is much wider, this is shallower, so it almost looks like it's got 2 different lights. If this were in the real world, this would probably be narrower and this one would be wider. So I've put the same in, and I'm just going to proceed as if that were the case. So this gives me the sort of hard edge thing, and we're pretty much there. The only other things I might add to it are that this box at the bottom here appears to be embossed in. So again, I might want to do that. If you were doing it in Illustrator, there's a very cool way of doing it using the same shape. I'm just going to hit copy, edit, paste in front. Then I'm going to hold down the Alt key and I'm going to drag it to make it slightly smaller. Okay, so I've got a small copy in front. I'll drag it down to the bottom. I'm going to come to the background one and I'm going to make it a bit darker. Use the eyedropper, pick this darker purple. These are exactly the same shapes. I've just made a copy, made it a bit smaller. Okay, want to make sure that they're properly aligned, so I'll go up to my transform palette, make sure I'm dealing with the bottom one, and they should all be at 480. So I'm just going to make sure that they are. It looks like they're risen up a slight bit. And I'm also going to go to my align palette and make sure that they're properly aligned. Okay. And there's a cool tool called the blend tool. And what Illustrator allows me to do is blend these 2 shapes. I'm going to zoom in, move across. So now I've got dark polygon, light polygon. I can use the blend tool. Click on one point from the first shape, click on the same point on the second. Hang on a minute, let's just group these. and then I'll go into the group editing mode, so I'm not going to have anything else in my way. Selected something in the background. Click on the one point on the first, click on the same point on the second, and it will create a blend. Double click, you get your options, so it's going to smooth the colour. You can see how it doesn't work with extremely complex compound paths, like if you were to take this D and what have you, it wouldn't work. But with basic shapes like this, it will blend the two. So I've got light to dark, looks perfect. Okay, so could do similar things with this, you know. We've got totally flat, pure flat one there. I could also copy and paste in front, copies of these. I could then squash them to halfway or something and multiply again like we've got here. I could put a gradient into them. It's entirely up to you. Normally if I go flat, I like to go completely flat and take these ones out actually, keep the narrower one. Okay, so to me that looks nice and sharp, got a good mix, so I'm quite happy with that. You could also put a gradient into your tabs if you wanted to give them that sense of depth. I'm keeping them flat because they're flat in the original. So I'd basically be happy with that now, apart from obviously this final icon just needs to be sorted out. I'm not going to show you how to do that one, partly for speed purposes and partly also because when you follow tutorials like this, it's really key that you try and apply the knowledge. So apply what you've learned here, work out what shapes you'd use, how you'd create the gap, how you create the line around here, how you join the two, how you'd separate off the tabs using Pathfinder and different objects, etc. Okay, a number of different ways to do it. Resolve it and work out how to do it yourself. So we're pretty much there, effectively. So what I want to do now is obviously potentially export this. I've got a group set of objects there. Obviously save your work. You could save it out literally using export as a JPEG. Normally when you save, it will save as Illustrator, or you could save as PDF. Okay, one of my favorite formats. You can do SVG. I wouldn't recommend it. Not many things handle SVG very well. If you're working for the web, sometimes it can be good. You can also go to the export option and export it as a PNG. You can choose whether you output every page or just use, for example, artboard 10, which is this one. I'm going to export that. I can choose the resolution. By default, it's screen because it's for web. I can choose my background color. I'm just going to hit OK with the defaults on here because it's for screen. Switch to my folder. Where was it? It's on the desktop. It's called UI Workshop. And I can open it in here and you can see the final quality. It's a JPEG. Oops. And it looks fine. So there's my JPEG. You could zoom in and inspect, but obviously when you zoom in, it'll start to pixelate. The only thing I haven't done perhaps on it to be true to the original is add drop shadows, but this is a pure 2D version. What I'm going to do now, same sort of thing I did before, I'm just going to move these over. And I'm going to duplicate that artboard again. Okay, so this would be color, let's say finished flat 2D, that's the one we just did. And the one we're going to make now is 2D plus. So I don't usually use Photoshop filters in Illustrator because obviously Photoshop is better at them. But things like this background object here, okay, if I group the number with the rest, so it applies it to the whole group, I can go up to effect. There are drop shadow things in here. Underneath stylized as a drop shadow, there's also Photoshop ones here as well. I'm going to try and stick to the Illustrator ones. Bear in mind that this will create a drop shadow, but it is going to obviously be pixels in the end, so it's resolution dependent. If I don't work at the right scale, it's not going to look great. Let's just narrow these down. They're pretty generic at the moment. Take my blur down a tiny bit. In fact, let's make I think in the original it almost looks like it's looking up. It's lit from below. And I might even drop my multiplier down. like so. So I could add depth into certain elements like this. Likewise, I could take these shapes and apply a drop shadow to these as well. So do the same thing, effect, stylize, drop shadow. Preview that, again keeping the same settings just to give it a bit of depth. You can see when you zoom in though, pixelation that you're going to get, which kind of defeats the point of doing it in Illustrator. And we're kind of getting there in terms of depth. What I would usually do is take this into Photoshop and apply those elements in Photoshop instead. So I'm going to show you that in another tutorial now. So I don't tend to do drop shadows and things inside Illustrator. They don't tend to necessarily work terribly well, as you can see here. I'm getting a lot of artifacting. If I suddenly wanted to blow this up for iPad, it's not going to look great like that. Now I could increase the resolution of my artboard and that would resolve it, but then I'd potentially be putting the wrong size assets out for something else. So since I've got Illustrator, I'm going to go through that, and Photoshop, I'm going to go through that Photoshop and Illustrator smart object thing, which is the clever way to work. So I'll see you in the next one.